This week on the Wake and Bake podcast.
I didn't really care about cannabis, didn't want to be writing about cannabis necessarily, ended up falling in love with it and, truly learning so much about cannabis and interviewing folks who had been helped by it.
Let's talk about what it's like for you to be a cannabis writer who is also a mom, but you also live in a prohibition state.
And you're in a really prohibition state. Am I correct in that? I don't think you guys can even get CBD.
Every day, I think that I kind of walk this fine line. There's some tension for me.
Look at Andrea's bookshelf. Is that not the craziest cannabis bookshelf on the face of the planet?
How long you got, Danielle? It's going to be a long one.
This episode of the Wake and Bake podcast is brought to you by Wake and Bake Hemp Co. Look, I know how overwhelming it can be to choose a CBD or hemp product that works because I've been there. Now, with hundreds of new CBD products hitting the market every day, it's even more overwhelming. At Wake and Bake Hemp Co, we did the research for you so you can skip the confusion and enjoy more calm, less tension, and better sleep. Visit wakeandbakehemp.co and check out our best sellers like our hemp-derived THC gummies, our CBD massage oil that doubles as a CBD lube, and Wake and Bark, our pet formula. We only source organic and natural ingredients, and every batch is lab tested. You can check the results of the lab tests by using the QR code right on the back of the label. And because you're a podcast listener, you can use the code Wake and Bake for 10% off your entire order. Visit wakeandbakehemp.co to learn more and let us know if you have any questions. We're here to help.
Today on the podcast, we are talking to author Danielle Simone Brand, the author of Weed Mom. But if you are not a weed mom, you need to stick around and listen anyway. In fact, we spend most of our time talking to Danielle about what it's like to be a cannabis writer in this day and age, about her journey into this space, and about what it's like to write out loud for the whole world about this plant when you are a mom, and especially for Danielle because she lives in a space where cannabis is prohibited. If you love cannabis and you love talking about cannabis, stick around. This is a great episode. But before we dive in, have you heard about the amazing program that we run over at the Cannabis Coaching Institute? It's called the Certified Cannabis Educator Program. In it, we give you all the tools, skills, and knowledge so that you can feel super confident about talking about this plant out loud to the whole world. And we also give you a pathway in order to turn this passion and this knowledge into a side hustle or even a full-blown career. There are many cannabis certification programs out there on the market, but CCI is unique in that we're combining not only learning about cannabis, but how to make a business out of it. Plus, we have a thriving, amazing cannabis community that you can come and join. We're all here for the same reason. We want to change the narrative around this plant. We want to teach the world about the potential benefits of this beautiful plant. And if you want to come join us, we encourage you to head to cannabiscoachinginstitute.com/CCEP. We'll see you on the other side.
Join me in welcoming Danielle Simone Brand. Now, in the past few years, Danielle has blasted in the cannabis scene and has created a freelance career writing almost exclusively about cannabis and now psychedelics. Danielle is also a published author and wrote one of my favorite books about cannabis of all time called Weed Mom. It's not just for moms. I think it's one of the easiest to read, well-researched. It's really one of the most comprehensive but simple to understand books I've read about cannabis. It's the one that I recommend most in my own bookstore. It also shares Danielle's story about how she came to cannabis, which I love as a writer because she came to it by exploring it as a writer. If you're interested in learning how to get paid to write about cannabis, for a limited time, Danielle is offering a bonus workshop for the Certified Cannabis Educator Program at CCI, and she will show you how to get freelancing gigs as a cannabis writer, so if you know you want to do that, if you want to get paid to talk and write about cannabis and you want to learn from people who have actually done it, like Danielle, check out the CCEP information and the podcast resources. So welcome, Danielle. Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you so much. I always love hanging out with y'all from CCI and Wake and Bake.
Yes. And she said y'all. So I should probably clue you in that it's not just us here on this podcast. I'd also like to introduce you to my co-host, Andrea Maharg. She's the founder of Reveal Cannabis and is the lead cannabis science educator at the Cannabis Coaching Institute. And she's my personal favorite Canadian. Welcome,
Woo!
Andrea.
Guess what we just found out 4 minutes ago? Danielle Simone Brand's mom is from woo, 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 Canada.
That's right. I'm a
Whoa.
Canadian citizen.
Are you really?
Yeah, well, now, just in time.
That's awesome. All right. I feel outnumbered. So let's get started.
And we're really so excited to have you on this podcast so that we can talk to you about your career in writing about cannabis just in general. So, can you talk to us about your career path in writing articles and books about cannabis? What was your journey from starting out to being all the way to a published author? Tell us about that, please.
Yeah, sure. So I've had kind of a circuitous career path, like a lot of folks out there. I picked up experience writing in the academic arena, and then I was a yoga teacher, pivoted and was a yoga teacher for a while, and definitely was communicating with my students through blogging and newsletters and things like that. So I was writing then as well, but really I chose to pivot into freelance writing around the end of 2016, beginning of 2017, somewhere in there. And I was a mom, I am a mom. My kids were littler at the time, and I needed something that I could do, in those few hours that I had while they were at school. And then, once I took them into bed at night and things like that, I was looking for flexible work, and writing has always, really pulled me and drawn my soul, honestly. So I started really just writing little personal essays about parenting because that was my, really immediate experience, and something that I felt like I could put into words and, put out in these different parenting sites like What's Up Moms and Cuveller and places like that. And so I was working really hard on these little essays and getting paid like $50. But, it felt really, really good to at least get a few things published and get my name out there. And I built on that. So after working with personal essays, I started pitching more nonfiction. Personal essays usually nonfiction too, but I started pitching more reported work where, I'd have to interview some sources or pull together some research. And, those sorts of assignments usually, are a little more serious. They pay a little bit better. They, tend to take more work as well. So I just kind of kept, gradually upping my, my game and my pitching skills and my writing skills as well. So I fell into this cannabis niche. Really, I tell the story in my book kind of by accident. I didn't really care about cannabis, didn't want to be writing about cannabis necessarily, but I saw calls for pitches. And friends would forward me stuff because I was living in California, like, oh, hey, legalization's happening. Now there's all this interest, you want to write a couple articles. And I was like, maybe. Okay, fine. Ended up falling in love with it and, truly like learning so much about cannabis and interviewing folks who had been helped by it, and those stories, those testimonials really helped change my mind about the plant. So anyway, from there, I developed a niche that was writing about cannabis and then another niche that was writing about parenting. And I was doing that for a lot of cannabis publications, but some mainstream publications too. And then sometimes those crossover works about cannabis and parenting together, which is really where my interest then, developed. The path to getting a book deal is a long one for many folks, and it was for me too. I actually wrote an entire book on something totally different before I wrote this proposal and got my agent and got this deal. So it was a several year process for me. I don't want to don't want to lie about that because it really it takes work. But after really just sort of increasing my credibility, showing my chops as a writer, I was able then to parlay that into a book deal, basically, because I had a lot of publications under my belt and I had, a good feel for the landscape of narrative nonfiction. But still the process was long and arduous, getting an agent, finding a publisher, and then, of course, like the whole process of producing and promoting the book.
I'm really glad that you were honest about that. Like, this wasn't just like an instant bestseller for you that you wrote in a couple of weekends. It's really important for people who are out there, doing the thing to hear that you got to keep on doing the thing and up leveling and get better in order to make that successful. Let's talk about what it's like for you to be a cannabis writer who is also a mom, but you also live in a prohibition state. So, what kind of obstacles have you faced with that trifecta? And has it changed any relationships that you have or opened up anything, being a canna mom in a prohibition state?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So, I didn't live in a prohib state when I started writing about cannabis. I was living in California, like I said, and then actually moved to a prohib state before getting the book deal. So it was an interesting like coincidence of moments there. So every day, I think that I kind of walk this fine line. There's some tension for me between the openness that I have on the internet and in this like, national, even international capacity to some degree, saying I'm a cannabis advocate. Here are the ways I think it's helpful as a parent, all that good stuff. And realizing that, in my community where I live, it's criminalized and I'm a parent and I need to be really cautious in that regard. There is a legalized movement where I live and I am part of it. We do collect signatures and we're working on our new initiative because last one failed. um, but so I do feel like I'm part of a small community of activists here, and that feels good to have a few people, who have my back. But really, like in my personal life, I'm fairly cautious still. I told a story a couple of weeks ago of teaching yoga at a fundraiser for my kids' school. It was a yoga, wine, and chocolate tasting event. Of course, I was like, gosh, this really should be cannabis. It goes so much better with, with yoga and wine, right? But even in a prohib state among, other moms, similar demographic, I suppose. There was talk of cannabis even there, even in a place where it's still heavily criminalized. So I feel like the conversations are happening and I am having them. And sometimes people are approaching me with them. Sometimes I'm, opening it up very cautiously, like with CBD or something, opening the conversation with CBD. But oftentimes people are coming to me or just interested in what I do. And when I talk to them about being a writer and writing about cannabis, there's way more openness than stigma that I've actually felt personally. Of course, out there, on the internet and the wide world, there's plenty of people who hate the idea of cannabis and moms, and plenty of people who are wanting to take us down. But generally speaking, in terms of my interactions, my personal interactions, both digitally and here in my everyday life, I feel like things are changing. The wind is changing, and I'm encouraged by it.
That's rad. And you're in a really prohibition state. Am I correct in that? Like, I don't think you guys can even get CBD, right? I can't.
There
couldn't
is
ship
CBD. There's ice.
There
You
is
can get
CBD.
isolate.
You can get isolate. Yeah, you can't get full spectrum CBD in the
You
place
can't
you're
even get
currently
full.
living. So that's pretty extreme. Like you said, you have this dual world. You have this online world where you're very outspoken. You're a huge member in the community. You've written a book about it, and then you're in a very, very prohibited place. What would you say to other people who live in prohibition states who know that they're passionate, they want to be working in cannabis? What would your advice be for somebody who's navigating that?
Oh, that's a great question. It depends on how they'd like to be involved. Obviously, if you want to hold a license, you have to wait until that's possible where you live, obviously. But there are so many ancillary businesses around cannabis, and writing obviously is one of them. Or having products that support, cannabis users or cannabis consumption is another area that I'm seeing women entrepreneurs, especially, moms living in places all over the place, including places where it's not legal, starting to join the industry and become part of it that way. Get to know your community, both online and in person, as much as you can. Like the more we have a support system and other women, that's my perspective, is like, speaking to and, for and about women as much as I can, because, that's my passion. I'm a feminist and I believe in women's and moms empowerment. And I want us to support each other. I know that I feel so much more confident in being an advocate when I have folks around me, whether it's actual IRL or just, on my online community like you and lots of other women that I've, had the privilege to meet recently.
Let's talk about writing.
Yeah.
Yeah, what would you say
Okay.
about that? And especially
Yeah.
in prohibition states, because I think that's such an interesting perspective to have. So many people in prohibition states, I think, are holding themselves back or like, I guess I'll wait till I can move to California to do this work. And so I'd love to hear, yeah, your thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, I didn't get started writing in a prohibition state. My general advice for breaking into the cannabis writing field is like work hard. You know that you will be working hard, but also work smart, right? So as much as you can, you don't reinvent the wheel. Lean on Facebook groups, writer newsletters, other writers in your network to like give each other ideas. Where are you pitching? Where are you, finding success? Who pays well? Who pays on time? That's a big one. I'd say study good writing, definitely. And, study good writing and good writers, because the clarity and the personality of our communications matters more and more these days. Like people really do respond to tone and content, and they don't want to just read a bunch of schlock. So take your time to write something good. And then in terms of if you're living in a prohib state, that is something that's so personal. Are you going to put your name on your work? So if you don't want to put your name on your work, you can write about cannabis, as a content marketer, as a blogger for brands, and you can still get paid, you can still learn, but your name won't necessarily be associated with it online. So that's a safer place to start if you want. Some people do use pen names, but it's not, especially in journalism, it's not recommended. If you want to just like start a personal blog and talk about your experience as a canna mom, and even your product recommendations and stuff, you don't have to use your real name. So it depends. Again, are you looking to go for mainstream publications, cannabis publications, or are you just sort of producing content to educate and build a business, even if it is not associated with your own name?
I just like
Yeah.
to kind of piggyback on that. Don't reinvent the wheel, and like get trained, study up, like take that time in the front
Mhm.
end. Something that I wish I would have done, but the information wasn't really collated at the time. And it was kind of like, you started in 2017. It was still at that place where you're like, I need to get this from this paper. I need to figure out if that's true or if that's an old myth that's hanging on or whatever it is, misinformation that's still sticky. So I would say that too. Just take that time and study as much as you can. Read a lot of cannabis writing. You've got like, look at Andrea's bookshelf. Is that not the craziest like cannabis bookshelf on the face of the planet? I mean, read those books, see what people have already written, see if things have been disproven, find like how people research those kinds of things.
And keep learning because it's changing. Like we know a bunch now, and there's so much further to go as we know. And, I'm still learning all the time, and I know you are as well, which is pretty exciting about this field.
Andrea's doing this face like, yeah, there's so much to learn because she's like in a huge geek out. She's gone way far down the rabbit hole recently. And she's like, you guys have no idea what we don't know now.
Every class I'm in, I'm like, oh, nothing. We know nothing. We've got zero answers to any questions. So
I want you to do a podcast on that. I want to know what your what all the open-ended questions are at this point in your perspective, from your perspective.
how long you got, Danielle? It's going to be a long one. Okay, let's circle back. So you said at the beginning that you had no interest in writing about cannabis, but then you got into it and it changed for you. You became passionate about this plant. What is maybe one of the most exciting or mind-blowing things that you've learned in this journey that you'd love for everyone to know?
I mean, the mind-blowing stuff, it seems so simple now. Like we have an endocannabinoid system, and these molecules, work with our body to achieve homeostasis. Like that is shocking because I think for so long, the stigma about cannabis is just that it clouds you. It does something weird to you. It like puts you in another state instead of like, it actually tunes you into, it makes your body work better, right? Right dose, right moment, right cannabinoids, all of that stuff. But, it actually tunes us up, in my view, and in a way that is like so, interesting and so counter to the stereotypes about what cannabis is. So I learned that early, but it's still kind of like, wow, yeah.
So I feel about it too. All right, what is coming up next for you, Danielle Simone Brand? A while ago, I tried to convince you to make Mushroom Mom. Is that coming? Like, is that the next book?
I don't know. I'm actually getting interested in pitching the book as a TV series because I think that a lot of the moms that I'm trying to reach are just, they're frazzled, they're hairy, that they're not sitting down necessarily to read an entire book, but they want information. And so I'm thinking like, I would love to be able to deliver this message about responsible cannabis consumption, wellness-based consumption, the changing, conversations all around it, in a video format. So we'll see. Like 2 years ago, I would have never imagined that I would want to do a project like this.
No, yes, you have to. It's like it's like How to Change Your Mind for weed moms. Like I want to see it.
That's what I'm hoping. That's what I'm hoping. And what I would want to do is just go around and interview people like you and, like broaden this conversation and bring a lot of perspectives and, talk about the science, talk about the policy, talk about the, raising kids and behavioral development and social interaction and all that good stuff. I just think that it's so ripe for exploration right now. Like we're in the beginning of this like long phase of normalization. I've said that before. And I think that, the need for information is just increasing.
Yeah, let's have us on your thing. We'll just have you keep coming on our thing, and then we'll just keep talking to each other as much as humanly possible forever and ever, because we love you so much, Danielle. Thank you so much for creating that book. Again, it's my favorite book to recommend. It is. I know I've said that to you a billion times, but it's still true. And we have like one left on the shelf, and I'm like, oh yeah, like I get so excited about who it's going to go to next. And it's not just for moms. It's not just for parents, which is what I love so much about it. It's so comprehensive and really well done. And you're amazing. And I can't wait to read or watch whatever you make next.
Oh, thank you so much. And I am still freelancing about cannabis and psychedelics and learning a ton as I go. So, that's my privilege. So much.
Too, because we get to read it all. So and hear about you on podcasts and soon to come on TV shows. This is awesome. I'm so glad that you never wanted to write about cannabis and then got into it.
Never wanted to write about cannabis, never wanted to be on film. Like I used to hate video like conference, just like with my mom. I'd be like, oh no, why? Don't look at me. It's just it's funny how you just get used to things.
Yeah. That's an interesting, and you brought this up earlier. I know we're wrapping up, but you brought up that pseudonym idea, and I didn't put my name on anything the first, I think, year that I was doing Wake and Bake. Or no, I put my name on it, but I didn't want my face on it. That was like my whole thing. And then I thought about writing as a pseudonym. That lasted for about a month. I was CT for like a month. And then I was like, this is confusing. I'm trying to actually get legit freelancing gigs. So there is that interesting thing of like coming out of the closet, as a professional, like taking those steps, and it's different for everybody. Some people are like, I'm ready to be on camera and I'm ready to write all the things. And if that's not you and you're just starting out, just know that like, that's okay. Just start writing, start doing the thing, do what you're like comfortable and excited about first, and know that the rest of it will eventually come.
Yeah, super well said. I couldn't agree with that more.
Yeah, look at us now. We're all here. We're all on on camera. And I'm pretty sure Andrea too, she didn't have her photo on her website either.
No,
right?
I hated video. I thought video was the devil.
She has like 15,000 YouTube subscribers now.
That's amazing. Yeah, the first things I read about cannabis, I did not share on social media. I was like, okay, if somebody reads it and sees my name out there, then like that's God's will.
I just think it's so great for people to hear, because people will look up to you or to Corinne or to me with YouTube and think like, oh, that must have been so easy. And it wasn't. None of this was easy. We took a whole bunch of risks and stuff and leaps that we didn't want to take necessarily, and just got through it. So I appreciate, again, hearing that from you as well, as like a seasoned professional writer, that still things aren't just like, oh, I just write stuff and then the money flows in,
I dictate in my sleep,
Yeah.
Oh, wouldn't that be nice? Ooh, if we get the AI to do that, then sign me up. Righty. Love you, ladies. Thank you so much.
It's Andrea here, popping in at the end, just to remind you that we absolutely love hearing from you. Corinne and I like text each other when we get comments and questions from you. So wherever you're watching or listening to this, or at support@wakeandbake.co, please let us know what you think. What kind of questions do you have? Do you think Danielle should write Mushroom Mom next? Tell us all your thoughts. We can't wait to hear from you. And of course, if this has inspired you to get out there and tell your cannabis story and to scream your cannabis voice from the top of the rooftops, then please join us over at the Cannabis Coaching Institute with our Certified Cannabis Educator program. We would love to have you on our side, on our mission of changing the narrative around this plant by telling everybody about the wonders of cannabis. All right, see you next time.